Before I dive into my topic, I would like to express my gratitude for being able to speak to you all today about women in male-dominated fields. I would also like to say that, while today will be focused on women in science, we also need to talk about Black, Indigenous, racialized, LGBTQ+, community members with disabilities in science, the intersectionality of some of these communities, and the systemic challenges that they face. As we continue to grow, acknowledge barriers, and open doors for members of our community, it's important that we're opening these doors for all members by explicitly inviting them to these conversations. Now, when we say male-dominated fields, what are we talking about? Are we saying that if a field has more men than women, then it's male-dominated? Catalyst, a workplace that works for women, defines male-dominated fields as those whose workforce is comprised of 25% or fewer women. But what about workplaces comprised of 65% women that have an almost entirely male team in senior administration? And what about workplaces that include women and treat them differently? Today, I'm here to talk to you about being a woman in science and the culture in science. It is not enough that we're including women in science and other STEM fields where they have traditionally been excluded. We need to start changing how women are treated once they enter these spaces. And the onus is on the entire scientific community to enact this change. At this point in time, I hope we're all familiar with the gender wage gap and common sexist phrases that remark on things like how pretty a professional woman's smile is. But it's important to note that these common acts of sexism extend to other, sometimes smaller and less noticeable acts that continue to perpetuate sexism. It is unintentional, but male-dominated fields have been the norm in our culture for so long that it is incredibly difficult to break away from habitually treating people differently. To show that all, or most of us, are guilty of that in some capacity, I would like to start with some personal background. My mom is a strong and successful woman in computer science, and both my aunts are brilliant in their respective fields. I've always been encouraged to pursue the fields that interest me, and for all intents and purposes, I was raised to believe that men and women are equal in academia. Growing up, I heard about some of the inequalities that my mom faced, especially the gender pay gap is the most obvious, but I was largely shielded by these issues until I came to university. So, why is it that the more I reflect on my unconscious actions, choices, social habits, the more I'm recognizing that I have a tendency to speak over women more than men? And why is it that I'm more likely to laugh in a technical conversation that isn't funny with a man who is my senior compared to a woman? It's unfortunate, and unconscious biases and our unconscious mind is so difficult to understand, but when we do reflect on these actions, and when we do feel frustration, it's important that we reflect on these frustrations, because allowing these unconscious biases to go unexamined only allows us to act further in ways that are inconsistent with our beliefs. And the unfortunate thing about these beliefs and these unconscious biases is that they go beyond our conversations and into the impactful decisions that we make. One of the worst issues and the largest tendency is that to promote men over women into leadership positions. Research has shown that this tendency is likely based on our unconscious preference for leaders who exhibit certain physical traits. In a 2011 study conducted at Harvard University, researchers demonstrated that women who wear makeup are more likely to be judged as competent, likable, and attractive than those without. Additionally, multiple studies corroborate that the deeper a man's registrar, the more likely he is to be successful, appear commanding, and be perceived as attractive. Unfortunately, the statistics are less straightforward for women. A deeper registrar in a woman is also associated with commanding and respect. However, they are perceived as attractive with their voices in higher registers. So why is it that a trait in men that commands respect, is leader-worthy, and attractive are all congruent, whereas in women these traits are incongruent? The the problem thickens when you consider a study done in 2018 at the University of Salzburg. Researchers demonstrated that women with a high degree of rated facial attractiveness were more likely to emerge as leaders throughout the study. There is an obvious paradox. We have a preference for leaders we consider to be attractive. In men, traits that are considered attractive and leader-worthy are congruent, whereas in women, these traits are incongruent. And this creates a massive challenge for women when they're trying to excel into senior leadership positions. And this challenge is represented in the absence of women on senior leadership teams. When we're talking about gender equality, we need to see it in leadership roles. A study done by the University of Massachusetts demonstrated that having women in senior positions, such as professors and mentors, helps to reduce the amount of negative stigma that community members have against women in those positions. Hiring teams need to be aware of the biases against women and also the impact that having a woman in senior role can have on the community when they're making decisions. Finally, I would like to talk about the benefit of having gender-inclusive teams. In November 2014, a team of women approached their director at the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development about a serious discrimination issue they were experiencing. They were concerned because the number of labs led by women had significantly declined since the scientific director at the time had been hired 5 years earlier. Additionally, the number of women leaving the organization was considerably higher than men. When women are discriminated against, it doesn't just harm them, it also impedes their projects and therefore science as a field. The British Medical Journal published an article that demonstrated that cardiovascular articles written by teams composed of men and women had a significantly higher impact factor than those articles that were written exclusively by men or women. It's important that we work together, and when we remove these barriers that impede women from doing their best quality of work, we improve science as a whole. Taking away these barriers and removing the challenges allows everyone to work cooperatively, collaboratively, efficiently, and effectively. Today, I talk to you about the things that we can do to improve equality in science. Equality isn't just about recruitment and retention, it's also about our culture, our language, and our daily interactions. That being said, I hope you won't just take what I've said today at face value. I hope that you'll go home, reflect on the things that you've said and done, and consider whether they too could have perpetuated gender inequality, however unintentional that may have been. And if you're a woman watching this talk, be it a first-year student or someone who's been in their profession for decades, I encourage you to seek out those leadership roles. Having women in these positions helps us to build a stronger community together.